Every time we go on an extreme diet or even like a small diet, we are fighting against our body's natural state, which is to keep us alive. So it's time for me to stop dieting and start brain hacking. I've been on a journey to find out if I can learn how to eat intuitively in order to heal my binge eating disorder. And intuitive eating, one of the principles told me that I had to throw out my scales and that I wasn't allowed to weigh myself and that I had to reject all concepts of diet culture. This week, I'm going to talk about Martha Beck and her book, The 4-Day Win. Her principle is that it's not about the diet we choose, it's about the way we program and reprogram our brains. So the 4-Day Win has a very similar top line principle to intuitive eating, which is that through years of restriction, our brains are trying to constantly trick us into eating more because it's so concerned that we're going to go on another diet. So this video is kind of the crossroads for me. It's, do I become someone who throws away my weighing scale and really go down the path of intuitive eating? Or do I try and bring in some of Martha Beck's mentality and find out if it's possible to heal binge eating and the need for extreme restriction followed by the need for extreme binging through data-driven and neuroplasticity approach? So there are 4 main exercises in the 4-Day Win. Exercises 1 and 2 are basically a little bit like intuitive eating, but it's all about observing your body and observing your thoughts and labeling them. Martha has a theory that we have all, any of us who have been major dieters, major bingers, major restrictors in the past, have created a famine brain. And because of the years of stopping ourselves from eating what we really wanted, our brains now think she's going to do it again any minute. So I'm going to try and trick her into eating as much as possible. And so we get these extreme urges to binge, as well as extreme, what's the word? Craving. So these extreme cravings, and that's because we've created famine brains for ourselves. So instead of fighting it, you just observe it and you just label it and say, oh yeah, I see. That's my famine brain. And so Martha's whole concept is that just by observing it, like any negative thought pattern, just observing it already can stop it in its tracks. The next exercise that she asks us to do is to observe and label 3 different voices. And so one of them is the dictator, and she asks us to picture a tiny dictator version of ourselves who's saying, you do want to be thin, you want to fit into that bikini. Then you have the wild child, who's the very natural evolutionary side of us, who's saying like, oh my God, she's going to go on another crazy diet. Eat everything you can. Ignore the dictator. Quick, we can't starve again. You need this. You need to eat these brownies. You need to eat this chocolate. You need to have chips for dinner. Chips! Because the wild child is the version of you that fears starvation. And by observing them, she then asks you to say, the only way you're able to observe them is because you're not them. You're a third person, you're one removed, you're the watcher. So call yourself the watcher. A bit like in intuitive eating. Intuitive eating, they had all the different voices, whereas Martha just has the 2, which is obviously simpler than trying to label each individual voice as it comes through, like the nutritionist. At least you know there is the dictator and the wild child, and then there's you, the watcher. Just being able to do that is the most important action you will ever take in trying to become somebody who has a healthy relationship with food. Exercises 3 and 4 are basically around bringing in small changes that lead to new habits. And that's why this book is called The 4-Day Win. You can create a new habit in 4 days. 4 days also happens to be just long enough that you would notice a change. So after 4 days of eating well, you would probably notice that your clothes felt a bit looser, or you would feel a bit thinner or whatever. And so she believes that just breaking everything down into 4 days, we can create new habits that will set us up for a lifetime of being our goal weights. So it's basically, this book is about building a series of tiny successful sprints. And after each of those sprints, you reward yourself. She really encourages not to do anything drastic. So don't suddenly cut carbs, don't suddenly reduce your calorie intake, but just sneak up on it slowly, because by sneaking up on your body, you stop it from triggering the famine brain. The brain never goes, whoa, 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 she's just taken off all carbs from the menu. So now we suddenly have to like push the cravings so she'll eat them so we don't go into famine and die. She says the same thing about exercise, which is this: don't suddenly start doing too much at once, but sneak up on 4-day increments. So whether that's adding to your step count or adding to a class every 4 days, whatever it is that you want to do for your exercise. And again, find the thing that makes you happy and do that. And then the ultimate rule of the whole book is just be nice to yourself and try to love yourself in whatever body, shape, size, weight you are. the kinder you are to yourself, the more chance you have of being successful. If you starve yourself, if you move too quickly, that's not being nice to yourself. That's not being kind to yourself. And as soon as you do that, you'll become the watcher and watch the wild child go absolutely mental and the dictator get really excited. So what I really love about this book is the concept of the reason diets don't work for us is because of neuroplasticity. Every time we go on an extreme diet or even like a small diet, we're fighting against our body's natural state, which is to keep us alive. And so the more we teach our bodies that it can trust us, that we're not going to suddenly restrict and we're not going to suddenly starve ourselves, the more chance we have of success, where we take away the moralization of food. So for example, and I keep coming back to this, but in France, there is no sense of immorality when it comes to sugar, and that includes kids. So you will see all the kids coming out of school at 4:30 p.m., parents waiting for them with a pastry or some chocolate, or there's that famous video, which is really true, which is you'll have like chunks of chocolate put into a baguette with some butter, and that is like considered a very normal goûter. And goûter is basically just the word for afternoon snack for children to get them from lunch to dinner. And goûter is always sweet. Even since my son was born, his French grandmother would try and give him a sweet goûter around 4 o'clock since he was eating, not since he was born, because it would be a bit much if she was giving a newborn baby some chocolate in a baguette. So there's no guilt around children, food, restriction, sugar. There's no culture of that here. And ultimately, people in France are much thinner than people in the Anglo-Saxon countries. And they do generally have a much healthier relationship with food. Another concept that she has is the idea of a high cognitive load and how that wreaks havoc on any behavioral changes you're trying to make. So to put that more simply, the more stress you put on your brain, the harder it's going to be for your brain to follow your new rules or to create new habits. So it's all well and good to say, okay, I'm going to go on a fast between 7 p.m. and 9 a.m. But the stress of that, of having to stick to that, and the rigidity and the urgency of that is already putting your brain into a state that it's very likely to not succeed. The brain actually does the opposite of what you want it to do, and it creates a kickback, and that usually looks like a binge. So all of these diets were working against our brains instead of harnessing their power and using neuroplasticity to help ourselves. The other amazing thing is that the concepts like stepping into the watcher and taking the step back and observing your thoughts, not only do they help your behavior, they're actually creating a physical change in your brain. And people who are able to move into the watcher state, which is essentially what meditation is just being able to observe your thoughts. And so by changing the physical structure of your brain, you're actually changing your brain's desire to create cravings for you and to push you to binge. It's nothing to do with your willpower. It's to do with the way that your brain is formed and the way the cells are communicating in there. So both of those books are telling me, like, this system of binge eating and extreme restriction has to go. So in a way, I feel like the 4-day win bridges the gap, because there are so many elements of intuitive eating which are similar, which talk about how we need to stop extreme restriction and we need to take a look at the voices in our heads as they come up. And also there's a lot of talk about how to introduce more joy into your life. So one of the actions I'm taking is to create a dopamine menu of non-food items. What I've been learning from this journey is that often when I think I'm hungry for something, it's just my brain looking for a little bit of dopamine. And so if I have another dopamine menu to hand of little things that I can either think about or actually go and do, then a lot of the time when I think I'm craving food, I can actually satiate through non-food, especially when we're living lives that are quite stressed and overstimulated and like busy. So I'm going to add in the link below a dopamine menu PDF for you to create your own dopamine menu. Stick it on your fridge. Every time we think we really want something, we can ask, is that just the wild child speaking? Or every time we hear the voice saying like, you can't eat that, is that just the dictator? And if we have our dopamine menu at hand as well, then there's no reason for us to ever reach for food when we don't need food. I hope that some of the amazing lessons I'm learning along the way are useful for you too.